Hey everybody, it's me, Margaret, and I'm here today to talk about project journals, whether or not we want to buy one, DIY one, or not have one at all. But I used to be in the camp of not have one at all, but I've changed my mind for several reasons, and maybe I'll change your mind too. Whenever the new year begins, we begin to see a whole bunch of crafting goal videos pop up to make us think about what it is we want to achieve in the coming year. Now, we may be tempted to buy one of these things, and so oftentimes we do, and then it often goes only half used or unused altogether, as eloquently stated by Deb. Journals and me usually break up shortly after we start, so this should be interesting. So before you actually spend money on one, let's figure out what it is you need, not what someone else thinks you may need. Now, it's important to note that in this video, I'm addressing both knitters and crocheters, those who do both, maybe sewists or crafters of any type. A journal can be used for all of those different topics. But let's first of all define what a knitting journal is, or a crochet journal. A knitting journal is a record, start to finish, of a project, says Cindy Michael, the owner of Harps and Thistles Yarn Emporium in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio. Well, I beg to differ, Miss Cindy Michael of Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio. It doesn't have to be that at all. A project journal can be anything related to your craft, and this might be the reason that you've not been able to maintain one in the past. It could be so many different things that I've got several examples here that I can show you. For example, you might keep one solely for the purpose of goal tracking. You may have made a list of things that you want to make in the coming years, or skills you want to achieve in the coming year. Who knows what your goals are, but it could be specifically for that and nothing else. Or maybe you want to add in there a gift record, or keep one completely separate. And what is a gift record? That would be something where you had notes on sizes, personal preferences, things that maybe they're allergic to wool. There could be a number of reasons, birthdays, anniversaries, whenever you might consider giving a gift. It doesn't have to be just for your own crafting gifts, for that matter. It could just be gifts in general. In that case, you're probably going to want to list the gifts that you have given them before for two reasons. One, you may not want to repeat that gift again, but two, maybe you do. Maybe your niece said, "You remember that hat you made me that was purple and blah, 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 blah. Well, I want another one because it's completely worn out. Could I have it in black, please?" If you don't know what she's talking about, or the notes or changes that you made in that, then you can't replicate that gift that made someone so happy in the past. It could also be for charity record and or planning, because different charities require different things, and you might need to have it referenced for that information in the future. For example, there are certain places that want blankets, but they only want blankets of a certain size. So boom, boom, you can refer to that. And as I gave you the example before, goal planning and only goal planning, single record journals are awesome for any purpose. Maybe I want to keep one of all the hats that I have made that are my favorite, that are easy, ones that I've made that I haven't liked. It could be anything that I want. Or Judy, for example, keeps one just for socks, which is awesome. Socks can be complicated little boogers, so it's a good idea to make your notes and changes, and again, likes and dislikes for the individual that you may be making them for, or I could go on and on. What if you had a notebook just for design reference? And what do I mean by that? I'm not a designer, Margaret. I don't need one for that. Well, maybe you do. What if you're out and about and you see a scarf that you absolutely love and you say, "Oh, I would love to have this. I could make this thing better, and I could use a higher quality yarn. And if I were to do it, I would make it this long and not that long." So why not snap a picture of it while you're in the store and come home and make notes on that? And that would be your own creation, even if you aren't an actual knitwear designer. If you are a knitwear designer, you'll want a place to keep your sketches and ideas that just pop into your head, or measurements and fiber content. This is key. Fiber content and its attributes. Like this one has wonderful drape, and this one tends to shrink, shrink, and this one it grows as you wear it during the day. All of those attributes are something very important that knitwear designers need to be aware of. And again, when I say knitwear, I'm also talking about crochet wear, so keep that in mind. And reference notes in general. How many times do I get out my hat sizing chart in order to start a new project? If I'm just doing something off the top of my head, or even if I'm not. If I'm looking at some instructions and they tell me to cast on a certain amount for a certain size, and I know that my typical gauge is going to render that hat too big, I'll refer over to my chart to see how those cast on numbers differ. And of course, I would have to take into consideration the pattern itself. Is it a repeating pattern of 4 stitches or whatever, and do the math in my head, but it gives me a reference, a place to start. I, as a matter of fact, am compiling my own book of references like that I can, things that I know that I want to refer to very quickly. I've been keeping them in my phone, and that works. As a matter of fact, because I have it with me wherever I am. But the problem with that is I can't always edit on that document. It may be a PDF or something like that, and if I don't have a particular app that allows me to do that, then I can't edit the digital version, or it's going to be a series of steps in order for me to do that. Whereas if I have a printed one, I can take my little handy dandy pencil and I can jot it down. Sure, I can go back in and update it digitally later if I want to, but isn't it more handy sometimes to use that good old pencil and paper?
And remember, this is coming from someone who loves her technology.
And I like the idea of having a section in a journal, or it could again be a separate book, that has inspiration and ideas. So that might be color combinations that you've run across, things that you didn't ever think about putting together before, and you say, my goodness, that looks awesome together. Or maybe you're watching a movie with someone, with a family member, and they see a hat in the movie and they go, oh, I would love to have a hat like that. And you're thinking to yourself, that is a good idea. I'm going to write that down and I'll see if I can replicate that hat as a gift. Now I can hear you. You purists are out there and you're saying, but Margaret, that would go in the gift record. Well, why? For example, I don't do a lot of gift giving in my craft work, so why would I have a whole section dedicated to that when I could really put it in my ideas area? Are you catching on here? I'm customizing to the way I work. So it could be any of these separately or a combination thereof. So first, I want to take a look at what already exists. We don't want to reinvent the wheel, right? Why make more work for yourself? And the first thing that popped into my head before I actually saw a hard copy that I actually appreciated was Ravelry. I am a techie person, and therefore doing all this stuff digitally is really going to pop into my head first. Now, Ravelry has a whole section where we can record the projects that we've done. And I used to do this a lot. I have since fallen out of the habit of doing it, but I am going to say that I really do like the project record that Ravelry supplies us. And here we can see it. This is a shawl I did called Down the Rabbit Hole. And as you can see, all the different categories, all the details that it prompts you to fill out, which is wonderful. It has a notes section down here, which, you know, is imperative, especially if you make any changes to the written pattern. Or maybe as you did it the first time, you want to think about some changes you would make the next time, things like that. I have no problem with Ravelry as a great project reference. The only thing is that it has its limitations because it isn't a hard copy. For example, there's nowhere to store the actual yarn that you used, to feel it, the swatch that you had, to see what your gauge was at that time, because remember, gauge does change. Well, let's keep talking about this, and then you can see if this is for you or not, which after all is the whole point of this video. So now let's move on to store-bought books, what someone else has already developed as a project journal. And once upon a time, I got my hands on a really good one, and that's when my thought pattern of digitally saving things began to change into the hard copy version. Unfortunately, that one is no longer available. Now, finding a great one can be a challenge. Now, you've got some drawbacks. You go to a bookstore, well, you're only going to be able to see what that bookstore happens to have in stock at that time. Yes, you can view all the pages, but there are other ones out there that you actually aren't having access to. So you say, no problem. I'm going to pop on over to Amazon or Barnes & Noble because I'm sure they have just about any option that I could imagine. So you do, and then what you realize is that now you're limited as to seeing what's inside. You don't know what kind of paper it's made out of. You can't hold it in your hand, and you can't see all that it includes. Another problem with online shopping, specifically to Amazon, I don't know if this is the case on Barnes & Noble, but anybody can upload. Anybody. Like, I can sit here and create one on my little computer and I can upload it for sale, which people have done. So you have to weed through all that crap, because I guarantee there is so much on there that you do not want, and yet there are some good ones that you do want to consider. And the last drawback that I think is really important is you can't customize it. For example, I have no intention of tracking my inventory, the stash that I have here at the house. That's something that doesn't interest me. It's not the way I work. So I don't want pages in my journal that are all about stash inventory. So here's one that I thought was pretty good right at first. When you click it, you can look inside. So it lets you peep in. I love the fact that it has references in it, and they're good references too, by the way. And then you have favorite sources. Use this place to note addresses, websites, store hours, phone numbers of your favorite sources for patterns and supplies. Well, this may be good information, but do you really need all these pages for it? I'm not sure. And then here we have yarn stash. Now, I know for a fact I don't want any of these pages at all in mine, although you may. And then we have some graph paper, which is great for designing. And that's all it tells us. We have no information, no other information about what is in this book other than what is written here. It does say that we have a place to record information on our projects, but we didn't see what that project page looked like. And here's an example of one that I was talking about earlier. It's not professionally designed. This is just some random person decided to make a knitting journal and uploaded it. So if we look inside, well, first let's look at this cover. It says it's a knitting journal. Okay, specifically for knitting is what I would assume. Now, it's got quotes all the way through it, quotes I don't particularly care for. It does have other quotes through it. Now let's look at this one. Now, do you really need to pay money for a book like this? I mean, you could literally make 3 columns and write it like this in any old notebook, right? I mean, why would you want to spend money on that with pay? I don't know. Let's keep looking. Here's the project page, and I don't have any problem with the project page itself. It seems to be detail-oriented, which is great. The only thing that I take issue with is the fact that it calls itself a knitting journal, but right here we have a hook, but no needle size down here. The project page itself is fine if that suits your needs. It's just incomplete as far as I'm concerned. I love the fact that it has a place here for the yarn label and a sketch photo. That's nice. Now, it's one thing for me to show different types of journals for everyone's different likes and dislikes, but here is one that I would avoid no matter who I am, and I'll show you why. It's poor design. That's this one. As we look inside of it, first of all, this page right here, the index. What's wrong with it? Well, basically it's just another one of those pages with lines on them, lines and columns. Easy for you to make. But the problem with it is the cute little pictures that they've put behind the lines. Now, the reason that's bad is because it makes the writing difficult to read. So can you read it? Well, yeah, if you use a contrasting pen or something like that, but for the most part, it will be difficult to read. And it's like that throughout this entire book. So here we have a project page, and I think the project page is very scant, doesn't have much information at all. And again, we have pictures behind writing, which is just not a good idea. So be aware of those things when choosing your journal. Now, I've been waving this one around, and yes, I did buy this from Amazon. I'll put a link to all those in the description box below so that you can look at them for yourself. But I consider this one to be a good one. But again, when you click the look inside button, you can't see everything here. You can't quite understand what a good book this is, or whether or not this book would be for you. So let's take a look at it. First thing to note, it's by the editors of Vogue, therefore you know it is properly edited and published. It's a product journal in the traditional sense, meaning it's a record of projects from start to finish, like Cindy Michael of Cuyahoga Falls said, or whatever her name was. This is room for 25 projects. It's a pretty basic project sheet right here, which is all most of us may need. And then on the facing page, you have graph paper. Now, it's important to note that this is not knitting graph paper. This is just traditional graph paper. And what's the difference? If we look closely at a swatch, we may think of a stitch as whatever we can see of that stitch from top to bottom. But if we do that, you can see that both the stitches above and below would be included, which would affect our design. So instead, we measure a stitch from each intersecting point, and thus the stitch is wider than it is tall. So to keep from getting disproportional shapes, it's easier to design with knitting graph paper, where each square is wider than it is tall. Alternatively, one could use intarsia or colorwork paper for an even more true-to-life representation. Now, this book does include what is traditionally called intarsia paper or colorwork paper, and it looks more like knitting does, like the knitting stitch does. And that's handy, but you don't get enough for every project. So if you're a designer who is in need of this, then that means you're going to have to probably make copies of this, and then print it, and then what? Fold it, staple it inside here to the project that you're working on. I don't know. The point being is that you can't add or subtract pages from it. Then when you turn your page, you've got the dotted note paper, and this is very popular among note paper today. It's not as bold as lines, but it helps you to keep your writing straight, which is very nice. And that's all you have for your project. You turn the page and then it starts with 12. Now, I do like the fact that it has little markers down here. Do you see where it says it lets you find your projects that you're looking for. And if we go back to the very beginning, you'll see how handy that is. Because here in the table of contents, you not only have everything that is in the book, but you also have a table of contents for your own projects. You give them names and it tells you where they are, and then you can flip through and you can easily find the project that you need. Now, I will point out that this has absolutely no place to put a swatch. You can't, I mean, I guess you can smush it in there, but you know, it's going to bulk your book up, and if you have more than one, in other words, it's very not practical for this. If you printed a pattern and you wanted to keep it with your pattern notes, well, you can't do that. So there's that. But it does have the best reference material in the back. Now, all back here, we have things like standard body measurements and, you know, for the feet and head size charts and body size charts for sweaters, and well, I could go on and on, but it is very good reference material. Of course, it has things in here that you may not need if you're a crocheter, because this is definitely a knitting journal. Can you use it for crochet? Well, of course you could use it for crochet, but just keep in mind that it has extra things in here that are specifically for knitting. Would I recommend this book? Well, why, yes, I would. I think it's a great book. But as we move on, let's consider whether we want to spend the money on a store-bought book, or if we might be better off designing our own. So here's the big question of the day. What wood do you find helpful? And how do you know if you've never used one? Or if you have used one and you haven't found it to be a successful journey? No worries, I'm here to help. The first thing to consider would be size, and this one is half a sheet of paper size. And it's a good size as far as I'm concerned. I don't have an issue with that. I like the fact that it's small enough to throw in a bag and carry. It's not a big bulky thing. I'm not locked into this size, however. If you are, that's something you need to know about yourself. Another thing is about durability. I'm not so sure how, this is just cardboard and it has a string binding. So when you hold it open, it does tend to kind of fall open to wherever it is you were last. It also has some wear and tear on the spine very easily. So I do wonder how much wear and tear this thing can handle. Again, it doesn't have the ability to add or subtract pages. I personally am a firm believer in weeding things out because I don't need that extra brain clutter. For example, crocheters, they don't need what's in this book, you know? And if I didn't want to keep a record of a hard copy record of my projects, I wouldn't want that in here either, and that's a large portion of this book, therefore it wouldn't be for me. So remember the whole point, customization. Now, in the description box below, you're going to see a link to my blog, and on my blog I have made a collection of a bunch of free printables for you. They're ideas to consider, and I've got them in different categories, which are reference, planning, design, and miscellaneous. Now, I've also, below that, given you some free printable design sets. People have taken the time to design multiple pages in a matching format, different themes, and it's worth looking at those. They're really cute. You need to review them to see if the project pages have the information on there that you like, blah, 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 kind of the things that we've just gone through. I was looking through these, and while I liked a lot of them, I didn't find one that suited me exactly. So what I did was I made 3 pages that suit me. Actually, it's only 2 pages that suit me. I made an extra one for people who like to do GIFs. I don't ever do GIFs, but I did that page for fun. I've provided 2 ways for you to use this. They're either printable, where you can just write on it with a pencil or whatever, or you can actually open this up in Google Drive. Now, I want to emphasize this. I do not have time to teach you how to use Google Drive. Plenty of people have already done that, so you just Google your question in there instead of writing it to me. So I would suggest that you just download the printable fill-in by hand version if you are not comfortable with editing in this software. I'm making a separate video to kind of give you an overview of each of these forms and how I intended them to be used for myself. But I'm also giving you ideas on how to customize it for yourself, because the whole point of this video is customization to suit your own needs. So if you just need a little overview on what it is, you can feel free to watch that video. But they are here available for your use on the blog, and I'll put the link in the description box below. So I hope you have fun perusing these links of free printables that I've given you. It could be inspiration for your own project journal, or maybe even a free way to test the waters to see if it's something that you want to put some effort into. As soon as I complete the companion video that goes with the forms that I designed, I'll have that in the description box as well. So in the meantime, enjoy. Thanks for watching. Bye. And so that's like what, 5 by 8 or something. I don't know. It just depends. So, you know,